on YouTube, so we can kind of go and maybe give it a minute here and then we can go.
All right, sounds great. All right, so it is 5:35, so we will get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Wegner, and I am the Communications and Public Affairs Manager for Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District. And welcome to this neighborhood information about the City of Verona Eastside Interceptor Sewer and the district's pumping station 17 force main. So we have several partners involved in the project on the call today, and we'll go through those presenters here in a moment. So just to talk through the meeting logistics quickly, if you are participating by phone, please know that you will only be able to listen to the presentation. We ask that participants do not use the raise hand feature during the presentation, because we will be taking all questions at the end of the presentation, at which time you can use the raise hand feature to indicate that you wish to speak. Attendees will be muted until it's their turn to speak. And to provide equal opportunity to all participants who wish to speak, we ask that you please try to limit your statements and questions to 5 minutes. Now, if your questions and statements do take a little bit longer than that allotted time, you are more than welcome to come back at the end and add to or continue your statements. We just want to make sure that we can get through everyone who does have questions or wants to make comments today. We will do our best to take speakers in the order in which they raise their hands, but just by virtue of the number of people that we have here today, know that it might not be exactly correct. Also just wanted everyone to let you know this meeting is being recorded and broadcast to YouTube. And if your presentation is a little small on your screen, you can always kind of pull those sidebars to extend it out a little bit to increase the view of your screen. So our agenda today, we just kind of went through the logistics. I will talk about the project team and presenters here in a moment, all the partners on the project. We'll give just a little bit of history about the two projects that 2 in 1, so to speak, the Verona Interceptor and the district's force main, a little project overview. We'll talk through the various routes that were considered and how the decision was come to for the selected route. Dane County will talk about their portion of the work. Ice Age Trail will also talk about their contribution. We'll talk about restoration of the area, including tree planting. There's a few renderings. We'll also talk about trees and sewer pipes. There has been some interest in that. Ongoing communication, construction schedule, and as noted before, we will cover the Q&A at the end. So our presenters today, Amanda Wegner, that's me. Again, I've already introduced myself. And then this project is a joint project between the parties that I'll go through now. So with the City of Verona, we have Theron Jacobson, who is the Public Works Director, and Dave Walker, who is a Parks Director and Forester. They are both with us today. With the district, we have Eric Jellin, who is the Project Manager. With the Ice Age Trail Alliance, Kevin Theseus, Director of Land Conservation. And then Dane County Parks and Land and Water Resources Department are here with us this evening. Sarah Riegelman, Park Property Planner, and Teresa Nelson, Stormwater Engineer. The project team consists of the City of Madison and Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District, owners of the project, so to speak, Dane County Parks and Land and Water Resources Department. Short, Elliott Hendrickson is the design engineer. Menger Construction Companies, they are the general contractor, and they do have various subcontractors, so you're aware of that. And in terms of construction inspection, that falls to Verona and district staff. So from here, I am going to turn it over to Eric Jellin with the district. And he's going to just kind of lay the groundwork, talking about a couple terms you might hear this evening, and then get into the history and a project overview. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Amanda, and thank you everyone for your interest and for attending. To start off, we wanted to define a few terms just so we're all know what we're talking about as we go through this presentation. There's some, fairly technical definition of terms on the screen here. I'm going to talk about them a little bit differently. So an interceptor pipe is, I'm going to talk about the system actually first. So the wastewater from your house will typically go through what we would call a lateral or a service connection to a local sewer pipe. And then that local sewer pipe will then join to a larger pipe, and it's that larger pipe that is typically called an interceptor pipe. So interceptors catch like neighborhood flows, and an interceptor can flow into another larger interceptor or can go to a treatment facility. Kind of an example would be local roads feeding into an arterial road feeding into an interstate. Force main pipe is basically, it's a pressurized pipe. It's on the discharge side of a pump. The pump pressurizes the flow in that pipe and it pushes it to a higher elevation. One example would be a sump pump in your basement. So actually that's an example of a pump station, but the pipe from the sump pump, that would be a force main. In this case, obviously, we're talking about a bigger one. Pumping station, basically it's a structure with pumps, electrical, mechanical equipment. It's used to impart that flow, to provide pressure to that flow and convey it from a lower elevation to a higher elevation. So again, that example, a sump pump, the sump is a structure, it's in your house, the pump's in there, it pressurizes the flow, it pushes it out, hopefully to the street. Effluent is basically cleaned wastewater. So it's wastewater, it's treated at a wastewater treatment plant to standards where it can be discharged to the environment. Next slide, please. So a little bit of history on the pipes that are existing and the new pipes that are going to go in. In 1960, the city of Verona constructed the Eastside Interceptor pipe, and at that time it flowed to, the city treated their own wastewater at that time, so it flowed to the city of Verona wastewater treatment plant. Sewers typically will follow creek corridors. The district, we have 96 miles of interceptors, and the majority of those are in creek corridors. And the reason for that is you need your interceptors to be low enough to catch all the flow if you don't want to pump it. If you want it to flow by gravity, then you have to be at the lowest point in the basin. And typically that's also where the creeks are, because they're flowing downhill too. In 1996, the city decided to connect to the sewer district for conveyance of their wastewater. So basically, the city of Verona got rid of the wastewater treatment plant and instead now pumps all of the city's wastewater to the district. So in 1996, the wastewater plant was demolished. The sewer district, we built a pumping station, our pumping station 17, and we also installed the pressurized force main. We call it pump station 17 force main. And basically that's pressurizing the flow, so all of the flow from Verona goes downhill, goes to our station, which there used to be a plant there, now that's just the station. Gets pressurized, goes uphill, and the discharge of that force main is actually up at the top, the high point of Cross Country Road. I'm going to skip the next two bullets and move on. So the following year in 1997, I'm going to come back to those. In 1997, the district built an effluent line, actually an effluent force main. So the raw wastewater from Verona goes to our pump station 17, goes up to that high point on Cross Country Road, goes down the hill, goes to another pump station. That pump station pumps it up another hill, and again it flows by gravity, goes downhill to yet another pump station, and that pump station finally gets it to our treatment plant, where all the raw wastewater is treated. So the effluent, the treated wastewater, in 97, we built a very long, 8 or 9 miles long force main that actually brings a portion of that treated effluent back to the watershed, and that discharges on the east side of Highway 18-151. And we actually, that effluent actually provides approximately 1/3 of the base flow of the Badger Mill Creek at Bruce Street. Also in 97, due to that effluent project, the city undertook a project on the stream banks to try and promote some vegetation growth. And throughout the years, there's been volunteer clearing along the Ice Age Trail north of County Highway, and that's an annual occurrence with limited success. Now I'm going to go back to those two bullets I skipped in 1996 and 2020. So here we are in 2020. The original Eastside Interceptor is now 60 years old. It doesn't quite have the capacity that Verona needs anymore to convey all the wastewater down to our pump station. It does have some leaks, so it's time for a new one. These two projects, they're very different in scope, and we'll go through that on the next slide. So the 1996 force main, it was a 16-inch diameter force main, average depth's 9 feet. Didn't really get a whole lot deeper than 9 feet. So force mains, you can somewhat follow the contours of the land. You don't necessarily need the gravity to have it flow because it's under pressure. So you can keep it a little bit shallower. There are 4 air release structures on there. So in this case, it's not always just a straight line. So if it goes up and goes down, you want to be able to release air at those high points. We had 1 creek crossing, and our dewatering operations were shallow well dewatering. The 2020 Interceptor and force main project, what we need to do with that, there's a lot more involved with this project. We need to maintain that 16-inch force main. So that's currently taking all of the wastewater from Verona and pumping it to our, eventually to our treatment plant. So we need to maintain that, make sure that stays in service. We're also going to install a new 24-inch force main, approximately 9 feet deep, and a 24-inch interceptor. That's the city's interceptor. That depth varies from 12 to 22 feet deep. We need to keep lateral separation between all the pipes, so we're trying to keep 10 feet of distance between the existing force main, our new force main, and the new interceptor. We're going to end up with 2 air release structures along the creek for the force main. The City of Verona is going to have 24 access structures on the interceptor, and access structure is a manhole. It's going to be either a 4-foot or a 5-foot diameter structure, and that's got to go all the way down to the bottom of the pipe. So those are going to be 12 to 20 foot tall structures, 4 to 5 feet wide. There's 10 local access structures, 8 creek crossings. 2 of them are for the force main and the interceptor. There are 9 connections of local sewers, and there are 2 interceptor connections. Remember, an interceptor can connect to another interceptor, so there are 2 interceptors connecting to the Eastside interceptor. We'll also be abandoning structures and pipe. There's bypass pumping, which you need to do when you're, if the current gravity sanitary sewer is out of commission, if you're constructing around it, you need to remove it and replace it in place. you need to take the flow that would have gone through that pipe and pump it around. That's what bypass pumping is. The dewatering operations for this project are deep wells. So we drill the wells, and then it takes up more room. It's a lot more involved. Also, there's trenchless installation on this project at Melody Circle, and then there will be 3 crossings at Main Street. Next slide.
Eric, can you just clarify, when you were talking about the access structure and you were talking about their height, are those above ground or partially above and below ground, just so people have a better understanding?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, those are below ground. So the pipe, yeah, what I meant was that the pipe's 12 feet below ground, that structure has to go down 12 feet. You will see, what you'll see at the top, you may see, actually I think those are cone structures. So basically you'll see what's called the casting in the lid, and those are going to be bolted down. You may see a little bit of concrete at the surface, but no, they're not sticking up 20 feet out of the ground.
Great, thank you. I was having a little vision as you mentioned that, so just wanted to clarify for everyone on the meeting today.
Thank you. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So the needs for the corridor, what do we need? It's not just the trench for this. There's erosion control, installation and maintenance to keep silt from running into the stream. The dewatering operations, so those wells that I mentioned, those are typically 12-inch diameter casings, put pumps down there, and then I believe there's 18-inch diameter discharge piping coming out of there. And then so that since you're pumping from the ground, you want to make sure that water is somewhat filtered before it gets back into the creek, so it goes through what's called either filter bags or in some cases I think they built some rock check dams with stone that it kind of filters the water, the dewatering water that is from the ground before it goes into the creek. Again, protecting the existing pipes in the ground there. We need to make sure we stay far away from those. There will be the trench for the 24-inch gravity interceptor sewer. We'll put that in. That'll go in first because that's the deeper pipe. And then 10 feet over, they'll install a portion of that, and then they'll fill it in, and then they'll go back and they'll dig another trench 10 feet over for the 24-inch force main. As they dig that trench, they actually need to dig below the bottom of the pipe and put what's called bedding stone underneath the pipe, and actually up around the pipe and over the top of the pipe as well. So that bedding stone, there's a lot of material there. It takes up a lot of room. You have to have piles of bedding stone. I believe there are piles of bedding stone out there right now. The trench spoils. Whatever you dig out of the trench, you need to set it aside until you can put it back in the trench. And some of it won't fit back in the trench because that space is now taken up with the bedding stone and with the pipe. So you'll have spoils that you need to haul away. You'll have spoils that you put back in. And also, as they go, they'll scrape off the topsoil. So they'll need a separate pile of topsoil so that they can put that topsoil back in place after they've got the trench filled up nearly to the top. And they'll put the topsoil at the very top so that we can revegetate the area. Also, there's other necessary materials, like for instance, the manholes. Before those manholes get buried, you got to bring them out to the job site and they need to be stored someplace out there. In addition, you want to have a drive aisle so that you can get to opposite sides of the work zone. And of course, you want to have workers' safety in mind as well. So you want to have enough room to keep everyone safe. Next slide. So an overview of what we're doing. We're replacing the Eastside Interceptor and the Pump Station 17. Well, we're not replacing the Pump Station 17 force main. The existing one's staying in place. The district, we actually need more capacity for the growing population of Verona and also for other areas in our service area that are growing. We're going to connect a sewer that's gone up to the north, that's currently, some of those areas to the north are pumping through a pump station and a force main over to a different basin. And in 3 to 5 years, maybe sooner, I'm not sure, 2 to 5 years, say, those stations are going to be retired. We're going to have a new interceptor that's going to come all the way down to the pump station 17 and then get pumped out by the pump station 17 force main. So we need that capacity in the future, in the fairly near future, and that's why we're doing this project now with the city of Verona. It made sense. I do want to say that the Department of Public Works for Verona has been great to work with. It's been great working with Theron. I think both entities, the district and the city, has realized some cost savings and some economies of scale by working on this project together. In addition to the force main and the new Eastside Interceptor, there's local connections to the adjacent neighborhoods. Bruce Street was closed for, there's be a traffic closure at Bruce Street for 6 weeks. That's actually open right now. There's temporary pavement for the winter, and then we'll have to come back in the spring and put the permanent pavement in, so there'll be another brief closure, excuse me, in the spring. There will be traffic impacts to Melody Circle and Arbor Vitae Place. The Ice Age Trail is going to be closed during construction for safety. The Dane County Parks also saw some opportunity for economies of scale, since we have access to the site. So they're going to be doing some creek restoration and some invasive removal. You'll hear about that a little later. South Main Street will remain open. We're doing the crossings, the trenchless crossings there. There may be some flagged, temporary flagging operations when there's deliveries and whatnot to the site. And I've already gone through the additional force main capacities required in 2 to 4 years. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So what you're seeing here is, finally we have a diagram of the project. So our pump station 17 is where all of these multicolored lines come together. That is the pump station. The blue line is the interceptor, which right now is undersized for the flow, but eventually when that final connection is made upstream, and actually that interceptor is going to go up about to Mineral Point Road. When that final connection is made, then we're going to need capacity at pump station 17. We're going to have to upgrade that, and we're going to need a bigger a force main relief pipe, we call it. So an extra force main pipe to pump all that away. And where that force main relief pipe and the new Eastside Interceptor is going to go is actually the yellow line. So that yellow line represents both the gravity sewer pipe and the force main. And again, going back to what an interceptor, what a force main is. So the interceptor is flowing by gravity down to pump station 17, and the force main is a pressurized pipe. There's pumps inside pump station 17 pressurizing that and pushing it back up the hill. The existing Eastside Interceptor is the green line. That one, it doesn't necessarily follow the topology of the land, so there may be parts where it goes down and goes up. The yellow line you can see is pretty much in the creek corridor. But again, that gravity line itself, it's sloped downhill from the upper end to the lower end. So regardless of if the land goes up or down, that pipe still has to be sloping down. And then finally, the red line there is the existing pump station 17 force main that was put in 1996. Next slide, please. So this is the central section. We'll have 2 of the creek crossings there. You can see of the force main and the interceptor. The red line, actually, you can see where we cross the existing interceptor, where we cross Highway M. There is a air release structure, which I talked about earlier, right on the north side of County Highway M there, because that way, if you're at a high point, you want to be able to release any air that comes out. There will be work in Melody Circle and to reconnect everybody who's connected in Melody Circle right now. We want to reconnect them to the new Eastside Interceptor. I don't think there's anything else on this slide. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is the north section of the project. Again, the red line is the existing force main. It crosses the creek before the end of this project. And initially, the district was going to stop our project there. But we decided to stay on the south side of the creek and just go all the way to the end of the Eastside Interceptor project. And again, we'll come back for phase 2 in 2 to 4 years. We'll need to connect onto that and then move on to the end. I'm not sure what else to say about this one. I know Theron has the next group of slides on route selection, and so I think I would turn it over to you, Theron, if you have anything to add on the project overview.
Yeah, I think it's just for the project. Good evening, everyone. Theron Jacobson, City of Verona. Regarding Madison Met's future route for phase 2 of their force main route selection has not been completed. At this time, that'll be part of their design process when they get to that part of their project schedule for their capital improvement program. So regarding route selection for a sewer pipe, it could be a water transmission main, it could be a major storm sewer, or even a road. But this layout right here is part of a sewer project. So criteria that is used for the selection in a route is you gotta look at your connection points, reestablishing your local connections, or you're gonna be adding pump stations, which are a significant cost. So ultimately, the 1960 construction and all the local connections created this route. So identifying the exact route where we want to go today while maintaining service for the existing assets that are in the ground is one of the key elements. And also maintenance right now and for in the future, accessibility for temporary and or permanent. So being able to construct it, but then also being able to maintain the assets in the ground. Environmentally sensitive areas, what are out here? Street crossings, how many? Are we going to be open cut or trenchless installation? So open cut is with an excavator, you're carrying a trench box that's open to the atmosphere. Trenchless installation is what we are doing under South Main Street. You keep the road open and you basically drill the new pipe through the side of the road. Service update opportunities for capacity or maintenance elements. Easement and land acquisition, this is a significant challenge on multiple projects because there's the risk of condemnation. Nobody likes to use that, but it is a resource if we have to. And there's 2 elements with that. And one of them is the right to take. And I don't like using the word take, I like to use the word acquire, but a property owner can challenge that. And if there is opportunities for other routes, the condemnation commission or a judge could order that route to be done. So if the city would approach a route that may have been constructable, but had to condemn land, and there's another route that made more feasible sense or was potentially cheaper, that desired alternative, that could get ordered by another party. So we try and avoid that at all costs. The existing sewer pipe connectivity, I kind of chimed on that already. Constructability. Construction costs. Costs are always a concern. We try to keep the project as cheap as possible with doing the right construction methods, products, but also taking everything else into account too. Utility conflicts, potential service outage, excessive slopes. What's the terrain like? Can you actually build within this footprint? Are you dealing with severe slopes? Is there bedrock? What type of bedrock? Is it potential cobbles? Is it a fractured bedrock? Is it bedrock that is you need to saw or potentially blast? These are all things that are taken into the route selection. Next slide, please. So initially there was 4 alternatives that were completed as part of the design process. Those preliminary estimates range anywhere from 6.6 million to 10.5 million. And that includes the city and district project elements. Ultimately, the selected alternative is a combination of alternative 1 and 4. And I have the figures on the next upcoming slides. And then in December of 2020, after inquiries started coming in regarding the project, we looked at another alternative, and I had our consultant look at it. It was, all right, if the city wasn't going to be along the Badger Mill Creek corridor, or at least minimize that route length along the creek, where would we be? So we did an estimate on that, and it was $25 million versus the 4.5 million of city items in the current construction project. So we're over 5 times the cost. And that only includes the city project elements. And the district could still be right along the Badger Mill Creek, so that corridor would still be impacted. Next slide, please. So Route 1, I'll define the lines on here first. The pink/magenta line is the existing Eastside Interceptor. The green lines are the proposed pipes. So Eric kind of gave an overview of, under the project overview figures on a bird's eye view, this is a plan view of the entire corridor. So ultimately we're looking at this alternative, we're on the south side of the creek along the entire route. So from Bruce Street through M, along south of Melody, between Melody and Hillcrest, and then all the way up to Arbavita Place, where the northern limits of the project up by our siphon. And next slide, please. Alternative 2 looked at placing both pipes on the north side. Basically follow the existing interceptor. Significant constructability challenges, excavation or tunneling around 4 houses in Melody, very steep slopes east of Melody. There are significant constructability challenges along this route. So this route was eliminated as part of the alternatives analysis. Next slide, please. This one looked at utilizing existing routes for each asset. So the city of Verona would remain on the north side along their existing interceptor, potentially along within the same trench. Significant bypass pumping, major risks, lots of additional easement acquisition along Melody for temporary and permanent. And then MMSD would have been along their existing route down Bruce Street, up Locust, and then ultimately along the Badger Mill Creek corridor. Then also we would have been on impacting both sides of the corridor, not just one. So now, next slide, and then also got the cost estimates in the lower right corner of each of these, so you can see how the different alternatives costs vary based on quantities and constructability challenges and number of bid items. Alternative 4 basically put both assets on the south side of the creek from Bruce Street through M all the way up through Lincoln Street, and then the interceptor went to the north side of Lincoln Street to follow the existing interceptor corridor. Force main remained on the south. Ultimately, we took the hybrid of 1 and 4, and we put both new pipes on the south side of the creek for the entire corridor to have a common corridor for the project and for future access and constructability and minimizing other impacts west of the creek and narrowing up the corridor as much as possible. Next slide, please. So the selected route, the reasons for the selection: minimal easement acquisition, utilize a common corridor for MMSD's force main, confine the corridor, all pipes on one side, the least constructability challenges. We were able to engage in Ice Age trail improvements. It was ultimately ended up being the lowest cost. We were able to reduce any bypass pumping of the interceptor. There may still be bypass pumping of some local sewer connections, but it significantly reduces the risk and the amount of bypass pumping. Shortest overall length, Then also shortest tunneling lengths. Those are very costly elements when you have to tunnel, trenchless installation. Ease of connectivity to local sewers, allows abandonment of other local sewers, ease of access for maintenance, inspections, and then future repairs, future improvements as necessary, and then ultimately district and city benefits from economies of scale of the project. Next slide, please. This is the additional alternative that was done in December of 2020. This is that estimate of 25 million. So the project from Bruce Street through M, through the horseshoe of Badger Mill Creek, where the dual creek crossings are, southeast of Melody Circle would remain the same. Where the segment would differentiate is going north from there. So I'll define the lines on here. The black dotted line would still be MMSD. That would be their force main. They would still be along the creek. What could change is the city gravity system. We still have major local connections that we would have to reestablish by Arbavita Place and at the Lincoln Street cul-de-sac bridge. There's 3 connections at the Lincoln Street bridge, and then there's 3 connections up by Arbavita also. If we eliminated the interceptor between the Melody Circle endpoint of the interceptor through Arbavita, we'd have to add 2 additional lift stations also. And if we're not in that route, we would be installing new pipes, gravity and force main within the neighborhoods of Arbavita through Eastview, East Hillcrest, and then down South Hillcrest or down Elm. Either route, costs are still relatively going to be the same, but this alternative wasn't even looked at during the design just because we knew the cost up front without even laying this out. So this is not a good economies of scale approach alternative.
All right, well, thank you, Theron. So next we will turn it over to Sarah Riegelman with Dane County to talk about their portion of the project.
Thanks, Amanda, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. What I'm going to do is give an overview of Dane County's stream restoration project. So Dane County has always been interested in improving the section of Badger Mill Creek that goes through the county's Ice Age Trail Junction natural resource area. As mentioned earlier, knowing that the sewer project was happening, Dane County saw that as an opportunity to really partner with Verona and piggyback on with their project using the same contractor to restore this almost 1 mile section of Badger Mill Creek that goes from the Lincoln Street Bridge to Old PB, where the Badger Prairie Community Gardens are. Just a little bit of background, Badger Mill Creek is a Class 2 trout stream. The project is probably on one of the most degraded sections of the stream. It's very straight, shallow in size with little to no habitat or cover for trout. There's also some man-made berms that are along the banks that really prevent the stream from being connected to the adjacent wetlands and create kind of a lot of the steep eroded banks that you see along this section. And really, the goal of the stream restoration project is to improve trout habitat and reconnect the stream to its floodplain. So what I'll do is just kind of walk you through from the southern limits of the project area through the north through our plans here. And I do want to mention that this plan was developed in consultation with DNR fishery staff. They're the ones who really recommended the in-stream habitat features that you see on this plan. So if you want to start on the south end, the brown lines that you see here are where the log deflectors and log sills will be installed. They kind of create this checkerboard pattern that'll kind of bounce the stream back and forth and creating some meanders within the channel. And a lot of the wood structures that will be created, we're going to be using the trees that were harvested or removed as part of the sewer project, and that needed to be taken down too for some of the grading for the stream restoration work. So we'll be using the whole trees, so the tree trunks with the roots, the root balls and the tree tops, and really kind of layering those on top of each other to create these log sills. And that's really going to help narrow the channel, increase depth, and create those natural meanders within the channel. The yellow lines shown next to those log sills, that's where the berms are that will be removed to improve that floodplain connectivity. And then moving north upstream, the corridor kind of transitions into kind of a more open grassland, wetland environment where we'll be using rock deflectors that will be installed, and those are shown on the map with those green dots that you see there. And again, this will just add another habitat type and diversity to the project. There's also a few locations shown as the orange triangles where root rods will be installed. And then the yellow dots show where there will be some berm breaches. Basically removing just a small section of the berms in this area, again, for the purpose of reconnecting the stream to its floodplain. The whole length of the berms in this area can't be removed like we're proposing downstream due to the existing manholes in this area and our desire to really maintain that berm for the Ice Age Trail. Along with those aspects of the projects, we did include some areas for invasive species removal. So those are shown in the gray hatched areas on the north end and the south end. These areas are really thick with honeysuckle, box elder, buckthorn. So really some forestry mowing was done in these areas to remove those invasive species that are about 4 inches in diameter in size or less. Some follow-up herbicide treatment will be done in the summer, and more work is really going to be needed to get those invasive species under control before we do any seeding with native and fully kind of restore those native environments. Next slide, please. These next 4 slides were included to really help you visualize the project. So this first slide shows a diagram showing kind of a cross-section of the berm removal. So basically what we'll be doing is shaving off the top of that berm and matching the grade of the top of the stream bank to the grade behind the berm. So during high water events, the stream will basically then spill into the floodplain and dissipate, and kind of really decreasing the velocity that has caused a lot of the bank erosion that you see there today. So we're going to be really kind of decreasing the velocity and basically kind of it will not erode those banks anymore. Then next slide, please. On this next slide is a picture of the log sills that I mentioned in the lower right corner. This is a picture taken from the Sugar River at our Falk Wells wildlife area, just to kind of give you an example of what that will look like. So you can see it's really just this large brush bundle where tree trunks and the roots and the tops, the tree tops are all kind of layered on top of each other. And over time what will happen is sediment will collect and the vegetation will start to kind of grow and create a new bank that will be the inside bend of the river and kind of narrow up that channel. Next slide. And this is a cross-section and picture of a rock deflector. So these are oriented upstream into the flow, and similar to the log deflectors and log sills, will start to induce some of that sediment deposition behind them, and also create some riffles, improving dissolved oxygen, and also creating some of those more natural meanders by bouncing the stream back and forth. And next slide, please. And this last slide is a picture of what the root rods will look like. So again, it's a tree trunk anchored into the bank, and it has kind of the root ball sticking out into the stream and really providing some additional shelter and habitat for fish and insects. So that's what I had for covering the county's portion of the project. Hopefully this gives you a little bit better understanding of the project, and I look forward to answering any questions at the end.
Thank you, Sarah. So I will turn it over next to Kevin Fissius with the Ice Age Trail Alliance for the next 2 slides.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, everybody. A little bit first about the Ice Age Trail in general, and then we'll sink down and focus in on this project. Ice Age Trail is one of 11 national scenic trails in the country. It is over 1,000 miles long when it will be completed. We have approximately 670 miles that we consider open and signed and ready for folks to use. The Ice Age Trail Alliance, the organization I work for, is a nonprofit organization. We partner with groups like the National Park Service, the DNR, and many other partners like the city and Dane County. We have 13 staff headquartered here in Cross Plains, but our real muscle is out there in the field is our local volunteer chapters, including here in Dane County. Partners like the city, the county, they allow the Ice Age Trail to cross their property, and we partner with them to ensure that proper signage is out there, ensure that we are in a position or in a place that they are happy with, and that is what's happened here over the years in the city and with the county in this area. Typically, it's our Ice Age Trail Alliance volunteers that keep the trails open, that have worked hard to make sure the signage is good, to beat back those invasive species. They do a lot of restoration work as well. This area has historically been pretty tough because this invasive species, by their very nature, grow very quickly and aggressively, and it's been tough to sort of keep them at bay in certain areas. It's woody and herbaceous species as well. I credit their efforts, but it has been an uphill battle to this point, as some on the call would admit. So a couple of those of our volunteers, along with our former director of trail operations, worked with the city to lay out a new trail, a new position, a new proposed, I should say, route for the Ice Age Trail through the city and the county, and a bit on the county land as well. And in doing so, this happened, I guess, over the last 2 years. I'm new to the project, but I understand that it happened over the last 2 years. And in doing so, it was been the intent all along to try to have a Ice Age Trail that is separated from the proposed paved trail that's a little bit closer to the creek. And there are cases where, most cases, I think we can do that. There's some cases where we're going to probably get pretty pinched in on that. And we understand too that as this goes through the process and there's earth movers out there and all this work gets done, that some of those details are just going to have to wait. We're just going to have to wait and see what the grading looks like when it's all done. The city's assured us that we'll have a spot for the trail, and that we could even do a little bit of grading to help that. And restoration is sort of the same way. We know that we're going to have to wait a little bit to get the exact plans that we want or we want to hear about, but in the meantime, we've been working with the city and the county to, specifically Theron and Dave, to come up with species lists and trees and plants and seeds that we could put down in this area. We'll hear a little bit more about those in a little bit. Next slide, please. Thank you. For safety reasons, as mentioned earlier, the Ice Age Trail is closed. We've put this up on our website. We've put this on our app. And but we are quite lucky to find, we worked with the city again to find a really nice reroute. We don't always have a reroute when a segment is closed. In this case, we ended up with a pretty favorable reroute that goes through downtown and on the Military Ridge Trail. We will probably, this will be closed, I think, at least till 2022. We're not sure exactly when. Again, we're sort of waiting to see how things come back. We're not going to open up a piece of this trail. I think we'll probably open it up all at one time. Part of the reason is, Sarah mentioned some berm breaches on the eastern end of the project area. We're going to want to make sure those are safe. We're thinking boardwalk or something along those lines to complete the breaches. And of course, we want vegetation to start coming in before we start tromping on it. Grasses and seeds, they won't grow if we just open it up and get folks stepping on the Ice Age Trail right away. So We're not entirely sure, but we're thinking sometime in 2022. And really, the Ice Age Trail Alliance and the Ice Age Trail is here for the long haul. We're willing to, see that it might take a few years. Especially our local volunteer chapter here in Dane County has done a lot of restoration work, and we all understand that it's not going to be beautiful tomorrow, but it will be in a few years. So I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation today, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. So now we're going to turn it over to Dave Walker with the City of Verona to talk a little bit about trees and restoration along in the corridor.
Thank you. I guess for starters, let's talk a little bit about what was in the corridor, what it looked like a few months ago. What we had in there was a lot of volunteer trees. Some of that was regrowth from the 96 Madison Met project. Some of it was just growth that was there due to neglect in the stream corridor over a number of years. So species like cottonwood, box elder, willow, soft maples, mulberry, a lot of these are still on the west side of the creek in the corridor, which wasn't cleared. Obviously, a lot of these species are still there. Invasive species, which we had talked about, or the county talked about, that they had removed on their property as well. Buckthorn, honeysuckle, two of the worst that we know of. It's important to note that them species are still there on the hillside below Hillcrest, and then also on the hillside, below Melody Lane. And it's going to be an ongoing struggle to keep those out of there and really to keep that corridor clean for the entire length of it. We also know that along the Hillcrest side, obviously there's a corridor, or along the middle section, below the houses along Hillcrest there's some pretty high value oak trees and a nice native oak woods in there. And that's sort of what we would like to, repopulate the area with once the restoration efforts begin. So on the next slide. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the path. So obviously this has been the Eastview Heights Nature Sanctuary, the middle section here. That's what it's been named since the city took title of the property back when Eastview Heights was built. But it's been fairly neglected over the years, and I'll be the first to admit to that. What our goal here is to clean it up, to make it usable, to invite the public in there to use it, enjoy it, and to maximize the resource. So the multi-use trail, I guess how it's labeled on the plans now, is a maintenance path, which is a good term for sewer maintenance. I would tend to call it a multi-use path because 95% of the time that's going to be a bike path, a walking path, trail that we'll use to connect the existing paved trail that's along Highway M now, all the way along this corridor and eventually up to the Military Ridge and to Sanitary Park or the Little League Complex on the north side. And judging by the amount of residents that can connect between two populated areas, I'm sure that will get heavily used. We also want to use this opportunity to provide a separate segment for the Ice Age Trail. They obviously want to have a more natural feel to it. They don't have a hard surface path. They typically don't like to allow bikes on the Ice Age Trail section. So they'll have the opportunity to site the trail adjacent to, but in the same corridor as the paved path. So, on the next. What's been spec'd in the plan so far is the vegetative mix that gets used to restore the area. Two of the mixes that are the majority of it is this floodplain mix, and this would be in the low wetter areas, which would be mainly on the south end of the project, and then there's a few pocket wetlands up on the north end. The middle section would be the savanna, primarily the savanna woodland mix, which would be on the right here. Obviously, these are both native planting prairie mixes. One's obviously a little more adapted to upland or drier areas. There is also in the corridor some turf restoration. Most of that is in the local connections or the areas that border or buffer existing residential areas. But primarily through the corridor along the creek would be a mixture of these two here. And these are representative of what these will look like at maturity. Now bear in mind that with any sort of prairie, you're looking at, 2, 3, 4 years before you're going to see any kind of decent establishment, and it's a process. So something we're committed to. All right, on the next. And here's just a sheet from the project plans. It shows the restoration area just north of the Lincoln Street Bridge. And if you look at the different vegetation that's spec'd here, it's got some upland prairie mix in here, which would be both bordering the creek and then also on the area of the path. It's all the plus sign there. And I believe the dash lines in there around the path itself. I think that is wetland mix. Yeah, and you can see so through the whole project corridor, there's already the ground cover vegetation has been spec'd for the restoration. What hasn't been done yet is the trees. And as Kevin alluded to, what we're trying to do here is get the project done, get the vegetation, the ground cover, at least planted, established. Then the Ice Age Trail will come in and route the trail where it's most advantageous to do it. There are some pocket wetlands that need to be avoided. There's some opportunities where we can, improve the grade for them, provide a better corridor. Once we route that trail in addition to the paved trail, then we can identify areas where specifically we can plant trees, and that's what the next slide shows is variety of trees that we'll look to put in there. Obviously, in the upland species, we'll look to, this would be the area mainly, and I'll use the two sides of the middle section. On the Hillcrest side, we'd look to use more upland varieties, things that'll do better. These are all native species. These are native hardwoods, red and white oak, which is a lot of what's in there now. There's also a number of hickory and hackberry. Sugar maple is also another good native hardwood. So we would look to populate most of that area with those species. In the riparian areas, obviously you want something that can put up with a little more intermittent flooding or wet feeded, so to speak. Things like river birch, swamp white oak, basswood. Obviously there's more native varieties we can add. This is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you some example of what we would put in there instead of, cottonwood and box elder and those sorts of things. And then we'd also intermix some conifers in there for some winter interest. Obviously, if you look through the corridor there now, there's already some conifers in there. There's a row of Norway spruce just north of the Lincoln Street Bridge that will remain. There's a few other mixed pines in there as well, so we'd look to interplant a few of those in there just to keep some interest and a little bit more diversity, if you will. It's also, back to the last slide, it's important to note the time of this, because most of these upland species, particularly the oaks, the hickories, hackberries, and even birch, the nurseries only dig them in the spring. They're labeled spring plant only. So what we're looking to do is probably plant these earliest to be spring 2022, after at least the cover crop for the prairie planting is, started to establish. And then the Ice Age Trail's routed, and we identify planting areas and where we can put particular species and avoid the pocket wetlands and rock outcroppings and other natural features that already exist through the corridor. Okay, now next. And so let's talk a little more about the approach. So basically, if you're going from Highway M to the north up towards the county land, the area on the right side, which would be on the Hillcrest side of the multi-use path and the Ice Age Trail, we would define that more or less as the upland area. And the farther you go north towards the Lincoln Street Bridge and beyond, really the drier it gets, and you'll see there's more upland seed mix. There'll be more opportunity to plant more of the native hardwoods, the oaks and that sort of thing. And then really which would be the Melody Lane side of the path, which would be between the path and the creek, we would look to establish more of the riparian tree species in there. The idea being not that we want to put a dense woods back in there, we want to have a good, I guess I would say, a savanna type area. So there are places where we'll have, some thickly planted forested areas, but for the most part, if you look through the corridor, you'll see the paths, you'll see a prairie, and you'll see intermittent tree plantings. The idea is that in order to keep a prairie and good vegetation established there, we would need to keep a fair amount of light at that corridor in order to keep those growing in there. Okay.
All right, thanks, Dave. So Theron is going to take this next slide, and then we'll be back to you.
Thank you, Amanda. So trees and pipes. So there was a video presented. Most people have seen it regarding root penetration in clay pipes versus PVC pipes. Clay pipes, they're old, they're not widely used or used at all anymore. PVC pipes are the primary material for sewer systems, but nothing is foolproof. So just a little background on some of the old clay pipe versus new PVC pipe. The joints are now rubber gasketed in PVC pipes versus an oakum joint with lead joints where the oakum would swell as you pour the liquid lead on it. Lane length is greater for the PVC pipe versus a 13-foot or 20-foot length, depending on manufacturer. The old clay pipe, 4 to 6 foot, so you have more joints along your system with old clay pipe versus new technology. Both pipes can still deflect. You still have a potential for grades to change based on fluctuations in the ground with either water or just other activities that may occur. So that deflections can create open joints. Your manhole connections, you got a rubber collar now at a manhole which is sealed versus a old concrete collar at a manhole which is sealed at the time, but as it ages, it will crack, allow water in, which is what Eric is referring to as the leaks in the Verona system before. We got water coming into the system during high flow events along Badger Mill Creek, and the district has a inflow and infiltration committee that's trying to reduce those sources of water getting into the system. I can't speak exactly on how much inflow they have, but I do know it's a lot. I mean, regarding that 2018 storm, I think your peak flow at the plant was around 150 million gallons a day, and your typical average daily flow at the plant is around 40 million gallons a day. So over 3 times your average daily flow of clean water or clear water getting into the system that should not be there. So reducing that source of inflow into the system is always a benefit for everyone. And what I mean by that is you're not conveying clear water, you're not pumping clear water, you're not sizing your system for that, and also you're not treating that water because the treatment aspect is very expensive too. So also staff reached out to a third-party consultant that is not part of this project to get their professional recommendation. And ultimately, their conclusions are the best practice is not to plant trees within the utility easement, not just for the inflow element, but we have high groundwater conditions here. So ultimately, any breaches in your pipe, you're going to introduce inflow to the system. You also need access for maintenance vehicles, whether it's sewer cleaning, pipe assessments, rehabs. You also need to be able to walk the corridor. You need to see the corridor, check for sinkholes along your alignment. That could indicate maybe a settling trench or a collapsed pipe. A collapsed pipe would be a worst case scenario, which ultimately could create a sewer overflow or a leak or a discharge to the creek. And then locating the utilities. So, and any maintenance activities that occur with any sewer system, it's very large equipment. Our vac truck that the city owns is actually our largest piece of equipment that the Public Works and Utilities Department has. Fully loaded, it's 40 feet long, fully loaded, it weighs over 60,000 pounds. A small token compared to earth moving equipment, but it's a large piece of equipment that does not have a very good maneuverability area with a straight axle truck that it is. So those are the reasons with recommendations of leaving the corridor clear within the pipe area, but utilizing those other areas like Mr. Walker just identified with the uplands or right by the riparian areas where you're not going to impact the pipe. And that's all I have on that, Amanda.
Okay, these next few slides show I guess, just some cross sections, renderings of what we would envision this will look like when it's completed and matured. So sections A and B here would be, right below Melody Lane. This would be just south of the Lincoln Street footbridge. So if you look, you can see on section AA here. So right adjacent to the creek between there and what will be this multi-use path, you have some trees planted there. You have what'll be in most of that area an upland prairie seed mix. Then you have the path and a clear area between there and the Ice Age Trail. This corridor does get fairly thin in some areas, so we'd like to keep, as much separation between the two as we can. We think we can keep 25, 30, 40 feet. In some sections it may be as little as 10. But most important is directly under these paths, you can see is where the pipe locations are. So kind of double duty, we've got the path there with the pipe underneath it. So then as you go to the right of where the Ice Age Trail is located, you get more into the hillside, back transitioning into the slope area, and that's where we'll have the opportunity to plant a fair number of those upland tree varieties. Both of these sections are going to be fairly similar. And as we head north, we'll go to the next slide. Once we get just north of the Lincoln Street Bridge, you can see on here, this is where those existing spruce are shown on here. And this is also where the Ice Age Trail, then the corridor widens and they get the opportunity for the paths to be a bit more divergent. So the Ice Age Trail really heads off to the east a bit more. The multi-use path stays more or less parallel with the creek channel. But again, you can see there's the area between the multi-use path and the creek would be intermittently planted with trees, and then fairly open savanna type area between the two. Obviously over the pipes would remain clear, but then the Ice Age Trail would meander back into a somewhat more of a wooded setting. And if you go up there right now, you can see that some of the trees were left there. So there's already some trees in there where it widens out. We'd look to interplant a few more in there to try and get some more, old forest reestablished in there. And then the next slide would be farther north yet a little bit. And this shows a lot of the same. This is where the Ice Age Trail and the city multi-use path really, there's 100-foot plus of separation between the two. And then the Ice Age Trail really transitions to going through more of a wooded corridor until it diverts and comes back down to cross the creek again at the northern end of the project. This is kind of what we would envision, at maturity, that this corridor would look like. Okay.
All right, Theron, back to you.
Thank you, Amanda. So some of the watershed improvements that the city's been doing it's been more on the localized level, not such a regional level that Dane County is doing on this project. And this is just a list of some of the projects that the stormwater utility has done within the Badger Mill Creek watershed. There's other projects that the city has done in other parts of the city that don't drain directly to this watershed. So in 2013, the Lincoln Street channel was rehabilitated from Lincoln Street to the eastern property limits of the city hall, city center. We also replaced the culvert under Lincoln Street to increase capacity, to minimize flooding upstream of there. 2017, we dredged out the Silent Street Pond. It's a wet pond. It's just west of the library. 2017 also, the phase 2 of the Lincoln Street channel rehabilitation was completed. That went from the phase 1 limits to the mouth of that channel, which is at Badger Mill Creek. And that project ultimately just entailed a reshaping of the bank and reestablishing vegetation along there and improved capacity based on the increase in the cross-sectional area of that channel. 2018, we engaged in the Lincoln Street pond design with a consultant. That is currently planned for construction in 2021. I know I jumped ahead here. 2019, we did some conveyance improvements up by the Gateway Pond. 2020, the pond sampling was completed, and that's still ongoing, that staff is working on to identify areas, other ponds within the city that would be put on a dredging schedule based on sediment loads that are in the pond currently. I mentioned 2021, the Lincoln Street Pond construction will begin. And then also part of that 2020 sampling project is completing the investigation of the Prairie Heights Pond, which is adjacent to Redden Park at Cross Country Road, and potentially dredging that out too. So once again, we've been looking at localized improvements, not getting to that regional scale yet. Yet is the key word. Thank you, Amanda. Excuse me, I have this slide too. Communication, increased communication requests. So we're going to have monthly Zoom meetings. It'll be the third Wednesday of the month, starting this month, next week on the 20th at 5 p.m. I will be there. I will also have my construction engineer on site. We'll be able to go over any schedule updates and answer any questions regarding construction progress and any other elements that are ongoing. And there's a website that the city has regarding this project. This Zoom link that is on this screen currently is on that webpage also. The Zoom link will not change from month to month, so it will remain the same for individuals that want to check in each month regarding the project. Next slide, please. Overall construction schedule has not changed since the beginning. So November 2020 through October 2021, with Dane County's work primarily occurring in July through August. And of course, schedules are always dependent on weather, whether it's in the winter or if it's in the summer with rains and flash floods along Badger Mill Creek. And schedules change, but we will always adapt. Below is a snapshot of the schedule that is on the website. So the clearing's been 95% completed. Bruce Street through County Highway M, the pipe installation that's occurring now. The trenchless installation is scheduled it's being prepped right now with planning on starting next week. That'll last anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. And then as they will cross on the north side of M also and continue pipe installation within February also and continue that way north. They're going to have multiple crews on site. And then Lincoln Street bridge to the east roughly in that June time frame, and then continuing on to the east till the end of the project limits. Next slide. Well, this is just kind of a more detailed image. Bruce Street was closed. It's reopened as of yesterday. It will be closed for a week in May, sometime to put the permanent pavement down. And then below is just a snapshot of a other project of a trenchless installation going under a railroad. You can just envision that looking like Main Street within the next week or two. And that's all I have on that one.
Thank you, Theron. So I want to just kind of talk a little bit about how folks can find additional information. So the City of Verona does have information on their website. The link is here on the slide. Obviously, that's not quite easy to remember, so I did put kind of the breadcrumb trail there. It's under Departments Public Work Projects, or if you simply put in Eastside Interceptor in the search bar, you will find the page as well. So going to that page, we'll find information on the project as well as a link to the monthly Zooms and things such as that. Dane County also has information on their website, and you can see here it's under what we do in active projects. The link is also listed here. If you have questions, this is the contact information for all of the speakers that we had on today's call. And Adam or Theron, you'll have to just confirm, will this presentation be on the website as well for people?
Amanda, yeah, I'll get that up on the website.
All right, great. So great. So for any participants here today who are looking for that information or those links on the prior screens, they are here. So before we move into the Q&A section, remember this is where you can raise your hand. We did receive some advanced questions today from friends of Badger Mill Creek, which we wanted to run through before opening it up to participants. So some of these were addressed in the presentation, but we'll run through them here. I will read them and then turn them over to the appropriate presenter to answer. So one of the questions is, can an advocate be appointed for oversight of this project who has the community restoration and environment as primary priorities? We recommend someone from Wisconsin DNR or a consultant who has worked with the city previously. Adam can weigh in here, but this is a policy question for the council, so it's not really something that we can answer here today. Another question was, how are the springs and the creek being protected during the trenching and other remaining phases of the project? Theron, would you like to tackle that one?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'll answer this in two parts, the spring and then the trenching. So the spring that is adjacent to South Hillcrest, between Melody and South Hillcrest, south of the Lincoln Street Bridge. Unfortunately, the excavation zone is going to run adjacent to that spring. We have to dewater to install the pipe, so that dewatering will run through the system. But once the project is completed in that area, is to match existing grades on that area. Any of the surface waters right there will run through the dewatering system and get discharged to the Badger Mill Creek. So we also discussed this during design on potential options, area, what could be done here, and ultimately we need to communicate with the DNR on what we can do, what may be able to be done, so we don't create any more challenges with the resource or the Ice Age Trail, and abide by any of the permits that we have also. There are ideas that we have, we just need to run them by the DNR. Regarding the trenching, when we physically install the pipe across Badger Mill Creek, there's two options we're doing. They're going to vary based on location. We're either going to bypass Badger Mill Creek, meaning install a temporary channel, or we're going to block the flow of Badger Mill Creek and bypass pump. When these pipe crossings do occur for Badger Mill Creek, we're not talking weeks. They're able to get across the creek in a day or two and then reintroduce flow to the creek. So we're talking about day operations versus weeks or months where other bypass measures would have been taken if we were on a different route. So minor impacts, temporary impacts, all have been coordinated with the DNR, all have been permitted. They are going to be on site for the first crossing. When we do that, they know our plan, the intent, and they are on board with what we are doing, and which was all part of the permit process too. So that is my answer for that one.
Thank you, Theron.
Yep.
So the next question is, in 2018 and 19, Badger Mill Creek area suffered large floods. And in the 2018 flood, some areas, including Neff Park, was underwater for days. Badger Mill Creek was up to Lincoln Street Bridge, and several homes in Lincoln Street, Holiday Court, and Melody Circle were flooded. Considering the vast removal of trees and vegetation so far during this project and the proposed increase in pervious surfaces along the creek, what steps are being taken now and in the restoration plan to mitigate flooding? Theron, and maybe Sarah, you had talked about the berm removal too as an option for that, if you had anything you wanted to add, but I'll start with Theron.
Thanks, Amanda. I'll give a little background on the watershed here. So the Badger Mill Creek watershed, there's a mapped floodplain with this that's regulated by FEMA. So this watershed is approximately 20 square mile in size. So you can put that into acres, it's about 12,800 acres, plus or minus, of course. So in 2008, that was a large flood. Verona received about 11 inches of rain. That rain depth varied regionally throughout Dane County. There was a lot of impacts in other municipalities. Verona had some impacts. Those impacts could have been a lot worse, but we weathered the storm as best we could with the infrastructure that we have. We did look at, after that flood came through, I got some inquiries, and there was a conceptual analysis that our stormwater engineer did that what could be done if we were able to lower the floodplain elevation. She looked at that, and basically, if we were able to just reduce the floodplain 6 inches, we would need to put in approximately a 40-acre pond, 5 feet deep. So it gives you a rough footprint of the amount of water amount of room that would be needed to shave off a small depth of water that is coming down Badger Mill Creek. And this is a very flashy creek. When rain events do occur, it rises quickly. It doesn't fall as quickly, but it does fall relatively quickly. So when flood flows come through here, it's not from the adjacent or direct lands that drain to it, it's from the overall region, which goes all the way up into Madison, Nesbitt, the Nesbitt Pond off of 151, and then also some of the Fitchburg area also drains into here. So it's a much larger area and not just this adjacent area. So base flood elevations are not anticipated to change in here. Sarah can chime on that too regarding anything with her project. Dane County, I know, is also reconnecting some of the floodplain aspect to promote more positive drainage when the flood waters do come through, so they can get back into the creek sooner instead of staging behind the berms. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Teresa or Sarah?
No, I think you covered it really well. I mean, we're not anticipating any changes, to the floodplain level based on the work that we'll be doing with those berm removals. So, yeah. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, so thank you. So another question was, would the city consider paying for a study or working with the DNR to determine how to best restore the trout stream and minimize flooding in the area, and commit to the extent possible to follow the resulting recommendations? Similar to the first question, this is a policy question that the Verona City Council would have to address, so not really something that we can answer here this evening. More questions. What does routine maintenance on a sewer system require in terms of heavy equipment? How is this maintenance completed currently when a paved road isn't adjacent? Theron or Eric, would you either of you like to handle this one? We did talk a little bit very broadly about the city of Verona's back truck being one of the biggest, and but what else would you like to add to this?
I can chime in first, Eric, talk about gravity lines, and then if you want to cover your collection system, feel free to add anything in. So regarding the routine maintenance on a sewer system, so gravity lines, they need to be cleaned a certain frequency, and that varies depending on size of service area, size of pipe, age of pipe, risks, and then also they need to be televised too. So cleaning, then televising after, get an assessment on the pipe. Is there repairs that are needed? Do you need to do a complete replacement of it? So you need to do frequent inspections, maintenance. Take a furnace in a household, for instance. They need tune-ups or inspections. You also need to do that with the assets that are under the ground, so to make sure you don't have any issues with them. Excavation or repairs may need to be done. We need to get equipment in there to perform that work. There's heavy equipment out there installing the pipe. It requires similar equipment to do repairs on pipes of such. We don't have the equipment to do that. These pipes are very large, they're deep, they require tools, equipment, labor, and power to access those and do repairs on them. You also got potential, collapses. You need to get down there and look at them. 2 years ago, there was a trench sink up on the dry trib on the west side of the city that we notified Madison Met of. It was actually their pipe. They had to come up, they came out, looked at it. They were able to, that pipe is larger, so they were able to go down to the manhole and actually look down the pipe and see it without having equipment down there, but that does not occur in every situation. And if there was an issue with the pipe, equipment would have needed to been mobilized to get in there. Future lining or replacement or repairs always are a challenge for any pipe under the ground. At some point, this pipe will exceed its life, whether it's due to capacity or it's just its structural life. Regarding how maintenance is completed currently when a paved road isn't adjacent, it's about timing. Luckily, the city of Verona, the majority, I mean a very high percentage of their pipes are under paved roads, or there is a small section of pipe that is not under a paved road. The primary areas where we have pipes that are not under paved roads is along this corridor. Hence, one of the reasons why we selected the road on the south side, so we can actually get to this pipe, maintain it, investigate, access it when needed. And that also is for the collection lines that connect to this system. We need to, you always access from the downstream point up when you're doing cleaning or televising. Eric, do you want to add anything on the gravity side, or, and then why don't you chime in on the force main side?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the activities would be the same as far as if there was emergency, you know, if there was a break, we'd have to get in there right away with heavy equipment to dig it up and fix whatever's broken there. You know, I mean, we don't, typically force mains, there shouldn't be a lot of maintenance on it, especially if it's brand new. You know, this should last 50, 60 years. But you're right, when, you know, after that time, then, you know, we may need to come in, we may need more capacity, we may need to, you know, there may be condition issues with that. And, you know, we have started a force main assessment program where we're assessing our force mains, our older force mains, which, you know, obviously this one we wouldn't have to assess for quite a while, but, you know, there is equipment that you need to get in. You'd have to get down to the pipe and either through a manhole, you'd have to take the entire top of the manhole. Our manholes are 6 foot diameter where our air releases are, so they have a 6 foot top on them, they're flat. We may need to get into those. Our typical maintenance, you know, most of that equipment we would just haul with a pickup truck. You know, you have to have, if you have guys going down, because we have just the 2 structures for air release, they need to inspect those air release valves periodically, at least once or twice a year. So they need to get down there, and they need to have a tripod to get down there. They need to have other equipment. They may need pumps if the manhole is full of water, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you both. So the next question, the width of the proposed maintenance path varies. What is the plan for the width of the paved maintenance path?
I can take that, Amanda. The maintenance, the multi-use path, it's a constant 10-foot wide asphalt path. It's constant throughout the whole job. It doesn't vary in width.
And what will be the allowed uses of that multi-use paved path?
All pedestrian modes of transportation, and then only motorized vehicles for maintenance or emergency services to be utilized. Dave, anything else on that?
Dave, you're muted.
No, nothing to add, just, I guess I would see it being used as all the other paved paths that are used, the one along M, the one out by Community Park, you know, it's it.
Great, thank you. What is the question? What is the rationale for the large gravel pads in the city of Verona plans? Aaron.
That's to provide stable ground for access to the manholes for any of the equipment that we need to get in for assessments, inspections. The ground is, when it's wet, it's soft, and this equipment weighs a lot, and being able to get the vac truck down there adjacent to these manholes or other maintenance equipment and not burying it to its axles is desired.
So the pipes are being installed in a 60-foot wide corridor in at least one section of the project. Could the pipes have been installed in a narrower corridor in other sections, even if that required more care by the consultants or others to avoid some obstacles?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, this narrow section, the 60-foot wide section is up by just south of the Lincoln Street Bridge. And that narrow section is due to existing features out there that are really obstacles we can't avoid, which is the Badger Mill Creek and the slope adjacent to there that we wanted to minimize any impacts to. So the contractor is utilizing that corridor, the 100-foot wide corridor south of Main Street, very thoroughly and fully. So there's little to no room for anything else going on down there.
So just a few more questions from the Friends of Badger Mill Creek. These ones relate to site restoration. How do the county's and city's conservation and restoration plans differ from north and south of the Lincoln Street Bridge? Dave in Dane County.
Yeah, well, I'll start. I guess the plans are, consistent in that they're using the same seed mixes for restoration, so you'll see the same upland seed mix continue through the city's property along the creek up through the county property. Barry, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, so yeah, we'll be using that same seed mix, so in all disturbed areas. So for example, the grading will be done for those berm removals. We'll be using that same seed mix, and really our usual approach for projects like this is we'll do the stream restoration, and then after the vegetation is established, then we'll kind of look at additional tree plantings or more restoration that could be done, working with our partners from Trout Unlimited or other Friends group. And then we would bring in Lars Higdon, our county naturalist, too, to help us kind of work out those restoration plans.
Great. When will the city have a restoration plan to share with citizens?
Well, I'd say it's, as part of some of it's already existing, the revegetation plan and the seed mixes and the prairie spec seed is all in the existing plans and is bid out as part of this project. As far as the tree planting and restoration, that probably look at that, or we will look at that after the project's completed, the prairie seed's been done, we know the routing of the Ice Age Trail. So we're probably looking at next fall for that, when we'll sit down and look at where it makes sense to plant trees and what to put where, get numbers together to let a contract for spring planting. So the answer to that part of it would be next fall. But as far as the restoration of the construction effort and the vegetative cover mix that's going in, those plans are visible today.
And what opportunities will the community have to provide input on the plan? Or is it done?
As far as the seed spec mix, obviously there's still the opportunity to tweak the species and varieties that are included in that a little bit. It's a custom mix, so there's the opportunity to change that a little bit. Most of the tree planting effort will be coordinated through the Park Commission or the Park and Forestry Commission, and in consultation with our partners with the Ice Age Trail, obviously. The county, what they're doing on their property as far as their restoration and planting effort, that's to them.
Okay. Kevin, this next one is for you. How much responsibility is the Ice Age Trail Alliance being given for the restoration, as they are a volunteer organization with big hearts but limited manpower?
Thanks. Yeah, how much responsibility, I guess, is somewhat up to the city themselves on how much the responsibility you want to give us. But typically, and in this case, I'd say what we've been doing in the past is really working around the corridor of the Ice Age Trail, keeping close to the trail. We're not going to be able to work from end to end, but certainly with the Ice Age Trail Alliance volunteers and staff will be able to sort of keep invasives out along the trail, and then work in conjunction with Dave and Theron and others in the city to make sure the worst areas are taken care of. Whether we have to work at a coordinated approach, if it's a contractor or Ice Age Trail Alliance. I know the Dane County volunteers, some are on this call, I know they are willing to jump at it, but we also have Prairie Marine down the road and Brooklyn Wildlife area as well that they're going to be working on. So I guess the answer is it depends, but I can tell you that we will be keeping the trail open and maintained and cleared.
This next one is for Theron. How will the springs be reconnected to the creek post trenching? Perhaps you touched on this earlier.
Yeah, I kind of briefed on that before. I mean, there's options we're looking at, whether it's through a stone French drain or if we can put piping in to slowly release that. I do know there was piping previously put in. I believe the Ice Age Trail put that in to keep the trail kind of passable in that area, so that's always been a challenge in there. That pipe is no longer there now. But those are coordinated efforts that we want to include the DNR on to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Great. Dave, this next one is for you. It's got two parts.
Yep.
What is the vision for continuous maintenance of the nature sanctuary? And what is the vision for the restoration of the riparian zone south of M to Fireman's Park?
Okay, so for the first part of the question, the continuous maintenance, obviously the establishment phase, which I would say is going to be the next 5 years, there's going to be a fair amount of ongoing work involving city staff and hopefully volunteer groups, which would include the Ice Age Trail, perhaps the Upper Sugar River Watershed Association, maybe some interested neighbors that may be listening now, perhaps Trouts Unlimited. But at any rate, there's a number of volunteers, and clearly there's going to be a pretty big city commitment to making sure that the prairie gets established, reseeding areas that need it, tree planting, and also obviously maintaining and replacing trees that don't make it, and probably adding additional ones where we see fit over the course of the next number of years. The hope is once, we get, the ground cover fairly established and get the trees rooted and past their initial transplant stage in the years to come, it'll be basically a maintenance effort where, we're just trying to go through probably more once a year to keep woody ornamentals out where we don't want them. And also, some, selective spot spraying. But the idea is once that vegetation gets fairly well established, it'll do a pretty good job at choking it out. But fighting invasives is a never-ending struggle, and that'll be ongoing for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. The second part of the question, the vision for the riparian zone south of M along Fireman's Park. We did this year seed prairie in Fireman's Park. We own a couple years ago as part of the Fireman's Park project. We purchased the creek itself and everything on the Fireman's Park side. So the area between the Fireman's Park Lake and the creek, obviously we spent last year cleaning invasives out of there, spraying it down, cleaning it out. It was seeded to prairie last fall. And then next spring we'll look to put some planting in along our side of the Badger Mill Creek, and also put a path in along there for access. The far side of the creek, or which would be the east side of the creek, is under private ownership. That's where the pipe corridor is, and that's just a limited easement that the city has in there now to install the pipe, and whatever restoration or whatever, ongoing planting they want to do there is up to that homeowner, private property owner.
Great. And so the last question, will a naturalist, fishery scientist, or others with expertise in conserving streams and woodlands be providing input on the restoration plan? Not sure who will cover that one.
On our part of the plan, certainly we have not reached out to the DNR yet to look at any kind of fisheries improvements we could do in there, but we're, I see this as kind of two separate projects really. There's the sewer project, which is to install the pipe, and then there's the, we would call the ongoing effort to really make it more of a park-like asset. That's where I would see that phase of it coming in future years as you know, tree planting, tree bank improvement, keeping the corridor clear, giving an established prairie there. So we would bring folks like that in on that phase of the project.
Excellent. So that was all of the questions from the Friends of Badger Mill Creek. So we can turn it over to participants for questions. Marty Fechner has raised their hand first. So Adam, if you want to promote Marty to speaker to ask his or her question. I apologize, Marty. And just as a reminder, we do ask participants to limit their comments to 5 minutes. Though we don't have a ton of people raising their hands right now, but certainly we can come back to you have more things you would like to comment on or share.
Yes, I'm not Marty's had her hand up for a while. I think maybe I'll demote her back. She's not responding. I'm trying to get her turned. Oh, there's Marty. Hi, Marty.
Sorry, that I was not intending to speak. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. So we have Jennifer John Cox, who was the next to raise the hand.
Can everyone hear me?
Nope.
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank everyone because I know what it's like to be in meetings all day and come home and be in another meeting. So I really appreciate your time. And I live on 102 Melody Circle. My husband and I bought this home in 2009, so our property is directly impacted. And so is the view of our backyard, which is why we bought the home in 2009. So I have a couple questions, and I will try to keep it to less than 5 minutes. Specifically, you talked about minor traffic on Melody Circle. Can you just kind of clarify what you anticipate what minor traffic might be, knowing I live on the circle and there's not too many homes here, how we might be impacted?
Man, I can take that.
Okay.
Minor traffic impacts, meaning the road won't be closed. You'll still have access, but there will be construction activities that occur in the cul-de-sac right there. We have to reestablish that local connection in the manhole that's right in the center of Melody Circle.
Right. Okay.
That's the minor impact. A major would be a closure.
Okay, so we can still get into our homes. That's no big deal. So kind of following up on that was my next question there. When we met and talked about the impact between 102 and 100 Melody Circle, you talked about the sewer pipe being tunneled, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, from across the creek through, we have a manhole cover in between our yards and then through the circle. But when I was looking at the drawings, it seemed like the tunneling was actually on the Melody Lane, Melody Circle side.
The tunneling goes from the cul-de-sac to the west side of the creek, and then it's open cut from the west side of the creek to the east side of the creek.
Okay, I'm a little disoriented. What I want to know is my side of the creek.
Your side.
So
We're tunneling from the cul-de-sac to your side of the creek. We're open cutting from your side of the creek to the other side of the creek.
Okay, but not across the backyard, not
No.
up to Melody Lane. Okay, so I think the green line in the drawings might have been a little off.
I don't know which green line you're referring to.
It looked like there was going to be piping parallel to the creek on the Melody Lane side of the creek, but I don't know
I'll
if
have
that's.
to look at that sheet. No, the layout is, the existing interceptor is right between there, and that line will be abandoned. The new line will be an 8-inch that goes from the center of the cul-de-sac to your side of the creek by trenchless,
Right.
and then open cut from your side of the creek to the east side of the creek. That has not changed since the bidding documents. The intent there is still the same. The only thing that's unknown is what type of drill rig the contractor is going to use, and those are dictated based on their means and methods.
And I heard from Eric that the tunneling is going to be 12 to 22 feet down. Is that?
No, that is the average, that is the range of depth between at manholes throughout the project.
Okay.
Yours is specific.
Okay.
So yours is a set line and grade to maintain flow. I
And
can meet with you separately if you want me to walk you through this again on site.
You know, we could talk about that, how it might impact my linden tree and things like that. But going this question, my next and last question to open it up for other people is for Dave. You were looking at the cross section, specifically C and D is what I see, and there was a lot of clear cut there. I mean, I used to be able to enjoy my backyard and not see people really, even if they were just walking along the Ice Age Trail. And I really enjoyed it. That's why we bought our property. And I want people to enjoy it. What I don't want is a paved path. You won't hear, this isn't the last you'll hear from me about the paved path. I'm not a proponent of that. But I would like to know specifically about the restoration there. I see a tree up alongside the creek. Does that mean that you plan to plant trees just along the side of the creek on the city property in section C and D?
Dave, you're muted.
Yeah, section C and D in the cross sections, which would be north of the Lincoln Street Bridge?
No, south.
Talking about south by Melody Circle, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's actually a pretty good sized planting area there, where the path will be coming down the hill, where the creek kind of then comes in to meet up with it. There's a pretty good size. There's some wetland obviously issues there.
Yeah.
We'll site specific trees until we can establish what, where they're going to be able to grow and what areas are going to be too wet to sustain it. But our intent would be specifically in that area to plant that fairly heavily, which would be what I call the oxbow there,
Okay.
Melody Circle. Between there and the path, there's actually a pretty good wide corridor between the paved path and the creek.
So you would anticipate more than just sedges planted there, which is what we initially heard, that it was a mix of grass seed. What I want to know is there going to be shrubbery and trees?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
And again, like Theron said, I mean, I'd be happy to meet with you down there, and it's going to be kind of hard to tell right now, but I could give you
Yeah.
a rough idea of what our intention would be in there.
Okay.
So,
I think that's all right now for my questions, but thank you again for everyone for your time.
okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. So next we have Lizbeth Ramsire. Again, I apologize if I butcher anyone's name tonight. It's not my intent. I'm trying.
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you very much for being here and giving us the opportunity to ask questions and knowing more about this project. I have a question, and I live in 114 Melody Circle. But I do have a question after the question were answered. But given the fact that this is unseen like two different projects, the sewer system project and the restoration project, and given the fact that this is happening in a natural sanctuary part of the land, is it a possibility that these two projects can be consulting each other so we can have a better outcome for what the whole outcome of these two projects is going to be? Like I enjoy this trail for the longest time. I have a love for it. And we've been seeing these, we've been coming to, I've only been living in Verona for 4 years, but we've been coming to this trail, specifically this one, for the longest time. since my youngest, who is 13, she's 5 now. So I'm just wondering, is it a way that we can have somebody to, like a way that can these two projects being seen as one? Because the nature of both projects and the importance of both projects that they have through this land.
So, not exactly sure which of the presenters want to take it. Maybe Dave?
That a bit, sure.
Oh,
In a sense, they are kind of treated as one. I get the city's ultimately going to, Madison Met's involvement with the force main through the corridor, but the city having ownership of the property will ultimately be involved in both phases of it, and we are right now working together on these phases now. But what'll happen is, I guess who's in charge of it sort of will transition, because right now it's essentially a construction project which the Public Works and Engineering section of the city is running. Okay, now as the years go by and we look to reseed, repopulate, improve the area, work with the Ice Age Trail to make it more of a natural, restore it to a nature preserve-like setting, those areas are going to transition more to the park side of it. And so, what you're seeing now and what will see for the short term here is the construction effort. And what you're going to see in the future as we keep going on this is more and more the restoration effort of it. And that's something that's going to be a long-term city commitment. And I would caution people, that's not something you're going to see. I mean, you'll see continued work at it, but you're not going to see immediate results. It's going to take some time to get trees reestablished in here and get the kind of ecosystem we want developed in here. But and I know I am, and I certainly from what I've heard from everyone at the city so far, we're committed to the long haul here in order to make this it really an asset to the community more so than it has been and is now. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and just my concern, I guess, I'm the way I'm seeing it is that two different projects, and if we can just work together more from the beginning, so we can do a more, like a better outcome of what mistake could happen before or things that could we prevented before, that, maybe I'm not, I guess that's my concern. Like I've seen it like two different projects versus one, and given to the nature of those importance of the two projects, I'm just wondering in that aspect, so we can bring in, somebody else, a scientist or naturalist that will have more expertise into the stream and woodlands. So we can that be combined from the beginning versus just doing it at the end of the sewer project.
Right. I guess, I don't know, Theron, you want to get in on that one? I'm not sure how to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, the communication we had between the Ice Age Trail and then with yourself, Walker, during the design process, we had the vision of how these projects were going to be laid out. The Ice Age Trail and the vision of wanting to see what the sewer project did to the area and how the improvements can be implemented afterwards. And Kevin, I asked you to chime in on, once I'm done talking too, the restoration effort has been in there since day one regarding reestablishing the ground cover and then fully knowing what improvements we would be doing to this corridor once the project was completed, so everyone had a vision of what could be done down here regarding at that staff level that we've communicated on beforehand, so that full vision was there. Kevin, do you want to chime in what on the Ice Age Trail's approach has been? No, it may not be the answer that everyone wants to hear, but that's what the intent has been, because this is not a small project, this is a massive project, and coordinating all these efforts and the amount of players that are involved in this project is challenging. Nothing's ever easy. This is a big project.
And that's the
Kevin,
reason.
you wanna...
Yeah, that's my concern because it's a big project.
Yeah, I'll just add that in working with the city, we knew it was going to be, it was going to look ugly. It was going to take some time, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense trying to do too much planning now. I mean, we have some general plans, which we've shown, but to do too much planning now and then have large machinery wreck that planning or things happen later on was just going to make it not worth it. So really, we looked at it as a clean slate. Okay, wipe away everything we can, do the grading that needs to happen, and then try to reestablish with something that's a little bit more sustainable. By sustainable, we're thinking trees that aren't invasive, trees that aren't super aggressive, and we're going to have to cut, we're cutting trees off the trail every year. We're going to try to minimize that maintenance effort. Same thing, restoration. We're going to try to find, plants that will be hardy and that'll grow. We obviously don't want to put those in until we're at that stage. And that stage is as early as fall, but even more so in spring of next year. So I guess the answer, Elizabeth, is we are thinking backwards to front, but we have to act from now forward. And so we've been involved from the beginning. We'll continue to be involved. Some of those details are going to have to wait.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. Next, we have Paul and Caitlin Kundi.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much just for the time that you guys are taking to talk with us. Really helpful to as many PowerPoints and drawings and schematics that I've looked at. It's really helpful to walk through all of this. I guess I just wanted to make just make one comment, and I think Jen commented on it. Being the first commenter tonight, and it's just, I guess I wanted to throw it out there because I think inevitably it'll be discussed more because a lot of people are going to be concerned about it. But I think you guys have done an excellent job of explaining the restoration process, whether it be the stream, what's happening in the adjacent areas, and I think for residents, I live at the end of Lincoln Street, right by the bridge, with my wife, and I think one of the big concerns that you'll hear repeatedly is that after all is said and done and we have the sewer line in place, I think one of the concerns with having a paved path, one of the reasons people like this area so much is because of the privacy. And so I know that's months away, like the path itself, but I think others might make that comment, and so I guess I just wanted to throw that out there for consideration. Reestablishing that privacy, thinking of a 10-foot wide paved path running through this corridor makes it seem, to use an analogy from earlier, not like a little path anymore, more of like a highway with lots of traffic. And so I think, residents adjacent to this area feel like they're losing some of that privacy that they really value. That was hugely appealing when we bought our house too. So I completely value the need for working utilities and expanding capacity, et cetera. But I guess I just wanted to throw that out there. So if things can be done that might bring back that privacy and that feel of it was very quaint before, and yes, overgrown with invasive species and lots of other things that weren't ideal. But that will be a concern going forward, I think, is just losing, turning something that was very private and secluded into something that's used more frequently, and maybe with a paved path. That's going to just be a feeling that is makes people a little bit uncomfortable, and that's going to cause some concern. So that's just a comment. I know I don't expect an answer, and I did want to thank everybody because I just like all of just like me, you guys have had long days, and it's a long meeting. So much appreciated for walking us through it all. Of course, we'll have more questions, but thank you. It's just an area that we hold very dearly, and so we're concerned about it. So we know you guys are doing excellent work, and we appreciate it. But that's why we're asking our questions, and we appreciate you being here. So that's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. So next we have Kyla Smith.
Hey everybody, I will echo the appreciation and the thanks that has been shared. Just this communication, the open communication and the transparency is very useful and very helpful. And like Paul said, you know, even after looking at all of these plans myself, spending some time with them, it's been helpful to have you all walk us through that, so thank you. Also, Dave, thank you for sharing those plans for restoration, especially in that area between Lincoln Street and M. I think those were plans that maybe we hadn't seen before, so those were helpful. And just even like the visual rendering of it as well was a nice touch, so thank you for that. I would also echo the concern about the paved path. I am Jen's neighbor, so we're 104 Melody Circle, and this home that we're in currently was actually my childhood home, and we bought it recently from my parents, and so the backyard view definitely holds a special place in all of our hearts, and the idea of a paved path running through there is a bit jarring, and you know, just thinking about it from an environmental standpoint, the type of wildlife that was native to this area and was living in this area likely would not return if that path was there, and so I just wanted to make sure that I expressed that concern. And then I do have a question, I think probably for Theron. Just wanted to, I know Theron, you were briefly on our property earlier in 2020 at some point, and you walked us through and you showed us the manhole cover, and we asked at that time about like some of our property in terms of some trees and things and like a fire pit area, and had asked about disruption to those things. And perhaps I'm not remembering correctly, but I don't really remember if there was a specific answer to that question. And maybe this is a conversation that can happen privately and not, you know, we don't need to necessarily drag out everyone's time. But just with the amount of clear cutting that happened on the other side of the creek, we're maybe feeling a little nervous about the amount of cutting that might happen on our property. So if you're able to speak to that at all.
Yeah, we're going to confine everything to the construction limits, which are within the existing sewer easement that abuts your property and your neighbor's property, and minimize any impacts on there. I think it would be most useful for me to go out on site and walk that with you instead of.
Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe we can get that set up.
Yep, I'll contact you and set up a date in the near future.
Thank you. And to everyone else, again, just thank you for your time, and looking forward to continued conversation around all of this.
Thank you, Kyla. Next we have Kathy and Jeff Johnson.
Hi, I also want to thank you for taking the time to putting together the presentation. I guess my question regards that seems like Dane County has extensive plans for the stream restoration. And since the stream is continuous, you know, it looks like they're doing extensive work on the stream on their portion. So my question is, is Verona's plans for the stream as it goes through their portion? And I know the restoration kind of covered the seed plantings and all that, which is very good, but I'm kind of asking the question as it relates to the stream.
Amanda, I can handle that question. That'll ultimately be a direction from the elected officials on what route they want to take, if they want us to proceed with any of that work or not at this time. So that is a future decision from a committee level.
So that is something, as folks can perhaps have some influence on that decision by interacting with city officials?
Correct. Adam, do you want to add any more?
Nope, I was gonna say yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So next we have Tim Spencer.
Yeah, I'm muted. Thanks, thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking my question. I have several questions related to sort of delve into the flooding. So first of all, with the paved path, I think you answered the question that it's not going to add to the flooding problem, but I'm curious about what does the flooding do to the path itself? I mean, that corridor does see some pretty frequent and extensive flooding. Is it going to damage that path that you may have to rebuild it multiple times?
I mean, at some point, it's going to exceed its life expectancy, just like a road would. I mean, as long as it drains, we provide positive drainage to the creek, it should, you know, exceed its life or, you know, make it to its life. Are there going to be saturated conditions down there? Of course, it's right next to a creek. But as long as we get a stable subgrade below it, your gravel base, the gravel base can drain and we get it capped with the asphalt, it should be as stable as possible down there. It's a flexible pavement. It's able to move with the ground. That's the kind of the best answer I can give you. Is it going to last as long as something that's high and dry? Potentially not, but if we build it right, it's on a sound base, it should last as long as it can within the conditions that it is.
Okay, and then another one is with the berm removal. I understand the berm removal, you'll allow the creek to flow into its natural floodplain a little more easier. That actually seems somewhat alarming, but I guess on the flip side, will that also allow the water to drain out of the floodplain quicker when there's a flooding situation?
It provides a direct route back. I mean, if water is if a berm is breached or if there's an opening available there, as quick as the water can flow into it, you know, it's easier to flow through the berm because it's elevated. As it drains back, it should follow that same route or find a direct route downstream like it does. Water is ultimately going to find its natural course of where it's going to want to go, but allowing that flow to move both ways instead of just one way is going to benefit the area. I mean, we're talking about a very wide floodplain. This floodplain is very, very wide through here. That north of Arbavita and then into the county lands on the north side, we're talking about minor improvements on a very large watershed scale, but these improvements are going to benefit this local area and the grounds that they're on. Sarah, do you want to add anything else to that?
No, I mean, you said pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I don't know if Teresa wants to add anything more, but that's the whole idea, that it will drain in and out. Yeah.
Yeah, and allowing the water to go into the floodplain during higher rain events will decrease the scour in the channel itself. The channel right now is very incised. It takes a large event for it to get out of the banks, and so while it's confined in the banks, those velocities are pretty high, and that's why currently there's a lot of bank erosion. So this will allow the water to go out and not do as much scouring as it is right now.
Okay, and then during the presentation, you mentioned during one of those flooding events that the amount of, clean water going into the pipes was quite high compared to the daily capacity. And I understand the desire to stop those leaks, and it's a positive thing. But then it occurred to me, what happens to all that water that's no longer leaking into your pipes during a flooding event? Do we need to be concerned about the next flooding event after you fix the leaks?
No, I mean the site you're talking about. The 100-year flood flow of Badger Mill Creek it's over 2,000 cubic feet per second. The capacity of this, even our new sewer pipe, which is a 24-inch, the capacity of that pipe is, I think, 6 CFS. So 6 CFS versus over 2,000 CFS, water needs to stay out of the sanitary sewer system.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just curious.
Not a concern.
We should be concerned about that. Okay. Then my final question, so for that paved path, I think at the meeting, city council meeting the other night, it was mentioned that the plan would be to clear it during the winter. Is that true? Is that necessary? And would any kind of salts or other chemicals be used in that clearing of snow during the winter?
Dave, your crew handles the path plowing, but I can answer it if you want.
No, I can answer it.
Okay.
We clear it just like we do all our other paths, so it will get plowed, sometimes broomed in light snow. The idea that people can use it for a walking path in winter conditions. And would salt be used on it? I guess if needed, yes, in some sections, particularly from Highway M down to the creek where there's a slope there. Obviously that needs to stay clear of ice so people don't slip on that. Once you get down on the bottom on the flat section, probably not as critical in there, but similar maintenance we do on the Lincoln Street footbridge. We plow and broom that and salt that path as needed from Lincoln Street up to Hillcrest.
Well, that was considered a pathway for kids walking to school. I understood that one. This one seemed, especially if it was bikers, it seemed less likely to need clearing. And the salt in that area concerns me, given the nature sanctuary part of that. Is that going to impact the wildlife and plants in that area?
In high amounts it would, but we don't salt it like we would Highway M, I guess. We use salt a lot more sparingly, but yeah, obviously there's some impact there, but deep-rooted area plants will help mitigate that.
Okay, I have a few more questions if there's nobody else, but otherwise, you move on to somebody else.
So Tim, there are a few other people with their hands raised, so if you don't mind coming back.
That works.
At the end. Thank you, I appreciate that. So we'll move next to Steve Madalinsky.
Hi there. Everybody hear me all right? Okay. So in terms of the paved path, I'm wondering if there's any kind of like percentage of importance or what is weighted more in terms of it being a utility road for maintenance or a multi-use path. What was the driving factor around that, or was there one that won out?
I can take that question. Dave, you can chime in. So, equal importance, it was identified in a ped bike plan that was presented to the council in 2017 that this was one of the desired routes on multiple ped improvements throughout the city of Verona, which we successfully implemented, others throughout the city, varying types of improvements. Regarding maintenance, it constituted both elements. We got a heavy sewer truck that we need to get down there occasionally, but then also it provides a multi-use path that individuals can use year-round. So the ability to have our truck down there on a stable ground and not worry about losing it during unstable ground conditions, soft ground conditions, wet conditions. So did one weigh out over the other? No, they complemented each other.
What was there, pressure from the constituents in Verona to have a multi-use path?
Yeah,
was there?
I can kind of jump in here too a little bit. Part of the reason we've been implementing a lot of these improvements is the southern part of our city is, for the most part, has been cut off from a bike and pedestrian standpoint. And those include the Scenic Ridge neighborhoods and those also Cathedral Point. And part of that is driven by the highway, obviously, that cuts through there. That's an obstacle that limits how many crossings and connections we can have there. So a lot of our efforts, along Locust Drive and County Highway M has been trying to address that kind of southern part of the city from a bike and pedestrian standpoint. How do we get them safely back up to especially the downtown area? I think as we looked at this kind of connection, kind of running northeast, southwest through here, we were trying to make a connection kind of from County Highway M up to where the Military Ridge State Trail is paved, which then provides a safe connection, obviously, into Madison, into that whole network of trails as well, too. That was kind of the goal back in 2016 and 2017 when we were working on that. And that was being driven heavily at that time, and it probably still is, of just, elected officials and people hearing from their constituents in that part of the city of just, hey, I can't safely walk someplace because of, the sidewalks aren't there, or the paths aren't there, or if my kids can't bike on a path. So we looked at this as kind of a, as Theron kind of explained, one, it serves a utility purpose, but then it provides that direct and kind of safe connection that is off street, that people can easily get into that larger kind of trail network that would kind of serve that overall system of the area.
Well, with that, is there any concern? There was a previous speaker talking about, increased traffic, but are there unintended consequences or negative aspects of increased traffic? So I have photographs of snowmobiles, heading through, Verona on paths that, are clearly marked as, no motorized vehicles. So, how do you speak to those issues when you're creating a much wider path, and what negative impacts could happen?
Yeah, I mean, from a snowmobile standpoint, that's an enforcement issue. That's also a club issue as well, of making sure that the riders are riding in the correct spots. That does happen from time to time. We've issued citations in the past on that. So, I mean, it's an enforcement standpoint. It's also making sure they're marking the trails appropriately and, they're being labeled and whatnot. From a strictly kind of safety standpoint and traffic standpoint, that, and Theron or Dave can jump in if I misspeak, but I mean, it's generally, it's a flat area, so it's going to be no different than kind of what you see, kind of as you head north. I mean, there's a little more rise there, but it's just a standard path. So, I mean, there's not much from a risk standpoint, no different than other paths that we have in the city.
But when there were, choke points or it wasn't paved and there was overgrowth, there was just kind of natural barriers, right, to, maybe an obvious visualization that this isn't a path where I'm taking larger vehicles down, those types of things, especially like the the zigzag walk points, right, to even prevent bikes, which if you're now creating a multi-use path, obviously you're saying we're open for business for that. Is there any plans to put lighting then in as part of a multi-use path?
There wasn't. Adam, I can take that one if you want.
You can take it.
Okay. No, Steve, there was not any intent to light this area along the corridor. Keep it natural and just pave it.
Okay. Those two are kind of
I know.
antithetical, right? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I guess I just... We were told in previous conversations, and Adam, I know you were on the call, that there wouldn't be a paved path through there. So I guess this isn't shocking. I've heard this, but it's I guess I'm with others. I'd like to continue the conversation. But yield back. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Steve. And then we have the Chris Juarez. I apologize.
I'm in the air.
Hello, my name is Jocelyn. This is so confusing when we're coming in and out. Thank you for moderating, Adam. Okay. I heard a question earlier about how the community would be able to provide feedback on the restoration plan, but I didn't hear an answer to that question, so I wanted to circle back to that question. how will the community have an opportunity to provide input on the restoration plan? And I did have one other comment as well.
So Dave, I think you handled that question originally.
I just answered your question, so, I mean, it somewhat depends on the, what part of the restoration plan you're talking about. I would say ultimately, yes, the park board is gonna be the oversight for the majority of the restoration. If you would have comments or, the, seed mix or the, you know, the prairie areas or establishment or where that's something that, you know, sooner than later, but it's a tree planting, ongoing maintenance, stream bank improvements, that sort of thing. That's something that we'll address at the park board, and you'd have the opportunity to on it or participate in that discussion at that point. That answer your question?
I think so. I'm not really familiar with how the public would provide input to park board business.
Well, at our monthly meetings, we meet once a month, and as the plans we review, update them, public comment, public participation at the park board meetings, and that's where we would be invited and welcome to come and share your thoughts or have input on it.
Great, thank you. I think a lot of people would like to have input. I live near the South Hillcrest Trail, so tons and tons of people walk by my house every day when they're using the path, and so many people have expressed concern with the project and the plans that would be less of a natural quiet area, so I think a lot of people would like to provide feedback on the plans. My other comment was just, I heard in the Common Council meeting on Monday, and then tonight a couple of times mentioned that the paved path would allow for the trail to be used year-round, and I thought it was important to clarify that the paved path is currently used year-round. People walk on it all the time. Thank you.
So is Amanda frozen? I think she might be frozen. All right, well, I'll take over as moderator until Amanda comes back. I don't see any more questions in the audience. I think Tim, you had some follow-up questions. I don't know if you, there he is. Okay, I'm gonna bring Tim back into the meeting.
Thanks. So a couple minor things. There's plans for stream restoration in the Dane County portion north of Lincoln Street Bridge. But I guess I was under the impression that the creek that far north, that it wasn't cool enough for trout, that the trout portion of the stream was south of Lincoln Street. And especially because we get water back from Madison, the treatment, I thought it came into the creek a little higher temperature and wasn't cool enough for trout until it got further south, especially when the springs started coming into play. So am I misunderstanding what can be done for trout north of Lincoln Street?
I can try to answer that a little bit. I might have to just follow up with Dan Ole with DNR Fisheries, who we consulted with on the planning for that. But my understanding is that it is designated trout water, but there are some of those temperature fluctuations. I think knowing that there is a healthy trout population downstream of this section, they seem to indicate that there's a lot of potential that once this work is done, it will provide habitat and those populations will start to move into this section. But I can follow up to get more information on that too.
Okay. And then for the stream improvements you're making for the trout north of Lincoln Street there, there's a lot using the existing trees. I'm just curious, what's the lifespan for those features, and will they just basically go away, or will you have to replace them?
No, usually once it's installed, it's permanent. They're anchored into the bank using a lot of like riprap and rock, and they're meant to stay there. So I mean, over time, those log sills, the one picture that I showed you from the Sugar River, that kind of all those large woody material brush bundle areas, that will just kind of become more looking like a natural bank. It'll kind of disappear because they'll become more vegetated, but everything is meant to stay and be there permanently. Yep.
Okay, thanks. That was it.
Thank you, Tim. Leah Ports has raised her hand. I don't know if you can promote her to speaker.
Hello. Yeah, just thanks again for everyone for being here. I like the transparency. It's nice to see and get some more clarification about the project. Just, I don't know about other people, but when I saw the signs initially on the Ice Age Trail, I thought, oh my gosh, is this a COVID joke? So it just kind of blindsided me. I live in the Neff subdivision, and the trail was another reason that I really wanted to move to the area and really liked it. I volunteered on that portion of Ice Age Trail a couple of times and personally ripped out some honeysuckle. And I have a few comments, less questions. From what I understand, it sounds like I can see the benefit of the paved trail going through as much as I hate the idea to everyone else in the community. And I think most people's concerns with the project that live around here would be that we didn't necessarily want another park. The fact that the trail was kind of overgrown and rambling, and obviously I helped clear some of it, which is fine, was the appealing factor. So the fact that I can see from bridge to bridge, I don't like it. I don't like being able to see all the way across, having a clear view. I think what was appealing about it was that you felt like you were kind of ensconced in the woods, like you were in the woods in the middle of Verona, which there aren't a lot of other places like that. Well, now there are none. So I guess I feel better that obviously with all these slides and comments and seeing what you guys have put together, I have a clearer picture of why it was done and what it's going to become. But also just want to say if there's a way that we can make it, I know there's like prairie restoration going in there, et cetera, but adding in more non-invasive species, shrubbery, like instead of honeysuckle, et cetera, to provide more places for wildlife to live. I saw some foxes run by my house the other night, and I'm like, I wonder if their habitat was just destroyed and they're looking for a new place to live. So adding that kind of stuff back in where, and I know obviously the Ice Age Trail will like look into that as well, but so I guess, yeah, I want to kind of reiterate what the Cundy said, where people like the fact that it was not like a park and it wasn't landscaped in any way, and it felt like you were in the woods, like a little magical private place in the middle of the city. So I hope that we can kind of get back to that someday. But I understand the need for improvements, connecting the south side of the city, all that. And I just want to thank you guys for the work that you've done already and just for letting concerned people talk. So thank you.
Thank you, Leah. So we don't have any other hands raised right now. So I'll give it about a minute. So if someone else has questions or wants to make comments, otherwise it's about 8 o'clock, just a little after. And I think we've all gotten a lot of good information and have been on for a while. So I think we're ready to wrap up unless there's anyone else who has comments or questions. So I'll give it about 30 seconds. As we had noted, the presentation will be made available on the website, and there is contact information for the individuals who presented today. So certainly if there are follow-up questions. And then as Sarah noted, there will be a monthly Zoom meeting on the project where everyone and anyone with concerns or questions about the project can participate in those. So with that, I don't see any more hands, but I did want to just turn it back to the presenters to see if anyone else had any final thoughts or closing statements before we close for the evening. No?
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, thank you everyone very much on behalf of the district and the city, the county, and the Ice Age Trail. Thank you and have a great night.